It was the morning of my 8th birthday. I woke up excited, ready for a day of celebration with my family and friends. Little did I know this birthday would turn into a nightmare. As I skipped downstairs for breakfast, I noticed an eerie silence in the house. Usually my mom would be cooking pancakes and my dad reading the newspaper. But the kitchen was empty. I checked the living room, bedrooms, even the backyard. There was no sign of anyone. Starting to worry, I ran back upstairs to wake up my sister. When I opened her bedroom door, I gasped in shock. Her bed was empty, and the sheets were streaked with blood. My heart racing, I sprinted down the street to my best friend's house. His front door stood ajar. I hesitantly stepped inside. I called my friend Billy, but there was no answer. The house was trashed, broken glass and overturned furniture. Then I saw Billy's lifeless body lying on the living room floor and a pool of blood around him. Tears flooded my eyes. What was happening? Where was my family? Just then I heard a scream from outside. Mrs. Johnson from next door came bursting through her front door, and a crazed man with a knife chasing after her. I stood paralyzed in fear as he tackled her to the ground and stabbed her repeatedly. Turning around, the man spotted me. He had a deranged look in his eye and blood dripping from the knife. I unfroze and ran as fast as I could, hearing his footsteps gaining on me. Suddenly I smacked straight into someone and fell backwards. Looking up, I realized it was my dad. "Dad, what's happening?" I cried. He said nothing, only staring with cold, lifeless eyes. His shirt was ripped and bloody. Without warning, he lunged at me. I barely rolled out of the way in time, springing to my feet. My own dad was trying to kill me. I fled down the street, cutting through neighbors' yards, hopping fences. I had to find Mum. When I got to our house, I stopped dead in my tracks. Through the window, I could see my mum slumped over the kitchen table, a pool of blood spreading across the floor. The sight made my knees buckle. This couldn't be real. Maybe I was having the nightmare. Just then, 2 hands grabbed me roughly from behind. I screamed as Mr. Johnson, our neighbor, spun me around to face him. He looked crazed, with bloodshot eyes and weeping scratches down his face. Snarling like an animal, he wrapped his hands around my throat and started squeezing. Thrashing violently, I broke free from his grasp. I scrambled away just as he tried to grab me again. My head was pounding and I could barely breathe. But I had to escape this madness. I ran down the street and into the woods, branches whipping my face. No matter how fast I ran, I couldn't escape the screams and sounds of people being brutally murdered, echoing from the neighborhood. Finally, I tripped over a rock and collapsed by a creek deep in the woods, exhausted and terrified. I wanted my parents to comfort me, to tell me everything would be okay. But I knew I'd never see them again. It was my 25th birthday. I should have been happy, but instead, I felt only dread as I stared at the calendar. Ever since I was little, something bad always happened on my birthday. When I turned 5, my dog got hit by a car. At 13, my parents got divorced. At 17, I got rejected from my dream college. The list went on and on. This year, I hoped things would be different. I didn't tell anyone it was my birthday, no party, no celebration. I just wanted a normal, uneventful day. I went through my morning routine as usual. I showered, got dressed and forced down some toast even though I had no appetite. I left for work a little early to stop for coffee. The barista wished me a happy birthday as she handed me my drink. I cringed and quickly left without responding, wondering how she knew. At work, I kept my head down, focusing on my tasks. No one said anything, and I started to relax. Maybe this year would actually be fine. Then at noon, my co-workers suddenly appeared at my desk with a cake, singing happy birthday. I sat there paralyzed while they cheered and took pictures. My heart pounded. This was it. Something terrible was coming. The rest of the workday inched by. Every noise made me flinch. Every phone call filled me with dread. But nothing happened. As 5 p.m. approached, I gathered my things. I was almost home free. Just get through the commute back home and I could barricade myself indoors. I stepped outside into the cold January air. The sun was already setting, casting an eerie glow over the snowy parking lot. I briskly walked to my car and slid inside. My breath came out in frosty puffs as I fumbled to get my keys into the ignition. The engine sputtered but refused to start. I cursed and tried again. Nothing. My car was dead. I banged my hands against the steering wheel in frustration. Then I remembered I had called an Uber this morning since I needed to get coffee. My car was still at home in my apartment parking lot. I pull out my phone to call another Uber, but there's no signal. The dread returned, sinking like a stone in my gut. The temperature was continuing to drop as the winter night set in. I knew I couldn't stay here much longer. I grabbed my things and headed back across the empty parking lot towards the main road. The streetlights flickered ominously. I walked faster. Suddenly, I heard shuffling footsteps behind me. I whipped my head around but saw nothing in the shadows. I told myself it was just my imagination. I continued on, my shoes crunching through the snow. Then I heard it again. The hairs on my neck stood up. I was being followed. I broke into a panicked run, the freezing air burning my lungs. The footsteps grew faster too, pounding on the frozen pavement. As I neared the main road, I let out a sob of relief. I could see the headlights of cars driving by. I was almost safe. I reached the sidewalk lining the road, just as a figure lunged out of the darkness and grabbed me. I screamed and twisted around to look at my attacker. It was a hideous, inhuman face leering back at me. The creature seized me with its claws, snarling and snapping. I told myself, so this was it. This was how my life would end on my 25th birthday, just as I'd feared. As the creature dragged me back towards the shadows, I glanced pleadingly at the passing cars, but none slowed or stopped. No one would save me. I went limp in resignation. The end had come. Suddenly the creature yanked off its mask, revealing my best friend underneath. "Surprise!" she yelled. "You should see your face right now. Gotcha so good." My other friends jumped out from behind the bushes, laughing and high-fiving each other. "Best birthday scare ever," one cheered. They all surrounded me, recounting how they planned this prank for weeks. I stood there in stunned disbelief. They really thought this was just some light-hearted birthday surprise. But they had no idea of the years of true horror birthdays had brought me. I started laughing too, a tinge of hysteria in my voice. They didn't realize it, but the twisted prank had delivered the worst birthday present of all. The tragic confirmation that even my closest friends had no fundamental understanding of me. And so I laughed and cried, caught somewhere between horror and relief. It's just another birthday after all. I'll never forget my little sister's 5th birthday, but not for a positive reason. It was at a tea-room type place that did princess parties for kids' birthdays. I didn't want to participate in any of the activities or princess interactions, since I was worried about people thinking I was a baby like a typical tough 6th grader. Instead, I was playing on my DS in a chair in the hallway when a random woman approached me. She asked in a sickly, sweet voice, "Aren't you going to join the party?" I shrugged and mumbled that it was for babies. "Oh, but you wouldn't want your sister to think you don't care about her special day, would you?" the woman continued. Something about her seemed off, but I couldn't quite place it. Reluctantly, I agreed to go back to the party room. My sister's eyes lit up when she saw me. "Play with me," she cried, grabbing my hand and pulling me towards the dress-up area. I felt ridiculous in the sparkly princess crown she'd plopped on my head, but it made her happy. We were having a pretend tea party when I noticed the strange woman standing in the corner watching us. She was wearing an employee uniform, but I didn't remember seeing her before. I pointed her out to one of the actual employees. "Who's that woman over there?" I asked. The employee looked confused. "What woman? It's just us working this party," she replied. A chill went down my spine as I looked back at the corner, but the creepy woman was gone. I tried to shake off the uneasy feeling as I continued to humor my sister's princess games, but I felt eyes on me and kept catching glimpses of the mystery woman lurking around the edges of the room. Eventually it was time for cake. As my sister blew out her candles, the lights suddenly went out, plunging the room into darkness. Several kids screamed. There was a strange, acrid smell, and I felt dizzy. When the lights flickered back on, the creepy woman was standing right in front of us, holding a knife. Before I could react, she grabbed my sister's arm and started dragging her towards the back exit. My sister cried and struggled to break free. Adrenaline coursed through me. I leapt up and charged at the woman, yelling for help. She swiped out with the knife, but I dodged it and smashed into her with all my weight. We tumbled to the floor as the other adults came rushing over. The woman was strong, but I hung on tightly, refusing to let her take my sister. The employees pried her knife away and restrained her until the police arrived. The woman had briefly worked for the tea room months earlier, but had been fired for erratic behavior. She was delusional and fixated on my sister for some reason, posing as an employee to sneak into the birthday party. I shuddered to think what would have happened if I hadn't intervened. My sister was shaken, but thankfully unharmed. She hugged me tight. "You saved me," she whispered. "I've never been more grateful for my sibling instincts. Now, whenever she blows out birthday candles, I'll always be watchful of the shadows, making sure the monsters stay at bay. Her special day may have been ruined, but what matters is that she's still here to see the next one.